Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another edition of On the Sports Lines for May 14th, 2020. With me, as always, are Anthony Strait on my top and Jay Kaplan on the bottom. And we are on the air a little bit before 8 tonight to give you our first, and hopefully not last, edition of the opener. Each week we will come up with a headline topic people have talked about, and we will do a roundtable discussion to open our show. Tonight's topic, Major League Baseball, and since we're talking about the opener, I guess it's appropriate that we bring in the origin of this segment's name with MLB. In a proposal approved Monday by Major League Baseball owners, there is a plan in place to start regular season baseball by the 4th of July. The plan would be an 80 to 82 game season. Teams would be playing in their empty home stadiums, and most games would be played inside their region to limit travel. The DH, don't get us started, Jay, would be universally implemented for this season and this season only. The owners wanted 50-50 split of revenues, and here's where another problem comes in. It's a move that players are trying to amend already and might cause this whole situation to blow up in everyone's face. Let's get some thought on this, starting with Jay.
You know, I got to tell you, and yes, I am in favor of the DH universally.
We know that already.
You know, so, and interestingly enough, the Mets are probably one of the few National League teams that, the way their roster is configured, they are set to actually be able to jump into this new National League scenario a lot easier than some of the other teams. I like the idea of the schedule. I mean, basically, you're starting it at the midway point of the season anyway. I like the regionalization of it, though. I mean, the teams in the central part of the country where the Central's playing the Central probably have it easier than where it's West versus West, or in our case here in New York, East versus East. You're looking at like 4 3-game series against your division opponent, like 2 3-game series against your non-division opponent. The thing that was going to be interesting for me is, like, how are they going to deal with Toronto? Since there's an issue with travel there, it wouldn't surprise me if the Blue Jays are going to have to play in Dundee, which is their spring training home. And looks like that, and some of the other teams may be forced to play, in certain parts of Florida or even Arizona. What's going to be intriguing for me is like the expanded playoffs. You're going to have, from 5 teams to 7 teams. Team with the best record gets a bye in the wild card round. Other 2 division winners play the wild cards, and and would face the bottom 3 like in a best of 3. So they're really like trying to make it almost one and done-ish in that regard. Here's the thing that Rabbi, you talked about the money, and obviously shocking. There's there's an issue of money between the Players Association and the owners. But here's the thing: is that wild card round. The thing that can put a monkey wrench into this team, and I'm looking at, everybody's talking about this, but you have to establish an acceptable level of health risk in terms of minimizing players, contracting the virus. To me, this is where, even if all of the other stuff gets worked out, this plan is still on shaky ground, because you have states that are part of the league that are in varying degrees of open and closedness, and some of that is still up in the air. Players want to protect themselves, even if you're playing with no fans. The league doesn't want to have an in-season outbreak once they get started. But and here's the thing. The players are the only group here that's taking the risk. So they're gonna, as much as the MLBPA is gonna put their foot down and make sure that the players get, a good slice of the revenue pie, especially, in a season where they've already accepted taking prorated salaries because it's not a full 162, and there's no gate receipts or concession receipts or parking receipts. This is the overlying factor. You want to make sure that once you get rolling, you have enough of a health plan in place so that you don't have to stop this a week, 2 weeks, a month in, because somebody on a team, maybe not even a player, but somebody who's, support staff who has to travel with the team, gets this, and you run the risk of the team getting infected. And what that does, all you need is for one team, guys, and it throws everything out the window. So money aside, logistics aside, how they get this sorted, to me, is going to be the thing that could doom the season, even if everything else gets worked out.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you, Jay. I mean, we're hearing a lot about the 50-50 split, which, of course, the players are not going to agree to. And by the way, someone to tell Blake Snell, if you're going to make a point about public health, you may want to leave your $7 million salary out of it.
Yeah.
Because at a time where you have Rays fans who would normally be lining up at Tropicana Field, lining up to go to food banks because they literally have to provide it for their families, and you're complaining about getting half of $7 million. That's not a good look. And look, the players are put in a tough position right now because you look at the fact that of course the owners passed the proposal and dumped it onto the players.
Sure.
But if the players disagree and don't want to go through with it, obviously the public perception is the players are greedy. The players want more of the revenue pie, which, by the way, half of it is gone because you're not going to have fans in the first place. But also, they are taking a health risk. They're the ones taking a risk because they're the ones that have to take the film. They're the ones that have to be tested regularly. And it don't even have to be a player. It could be a member of team personnel, a trainer, a manager of any kind. You do realize that we have managers in the league who are at risk of possibly, contracting coronavirus if a player or someone else gets infected. And they're the ones that there's no plan laid out for, okay, how many tests would you need to get, for all the teams to be able to play safely, and how frequently will you be tested each day, each week?
Yeah.
How does the logistics go as far as, traveling from city to city, even if you're just keeping it regional? You already talked about the Blue Jays situation. Here in New York, things are not open as of yet here in New York City. From what I understand, Citi Field Yankee Stadium may not be part of the equation as far as opening up. As far as Governor Cuomo's phasing of opening New York City, we don't know that. So it puts a lot of the teams in a very precarious spot as far as, okay, we get to play at our home stadiums, but we don't know if some of our cities are even open right now to make those things happen. Like you see, I woke up early in the morning, I watched some of the games in South Korea, and they're being able to pull off so far, but it only takes one test to kind of throw everything out the window. We saw it with the UFC last week. They was able to manage to pull off a card, but now we're having a situation where a fighter was tested positive along with two of his cornermen had to be pulled to a car, and because he was using facilities that the other fighters were using, now it's creating a whole ball of can of worms right now. And you may have that same situation in Major League Baseball, whereas everyone's in the same clubhouse, everyone stays in the same hotel. You may have players who don't want to be away from families and may have to be quarantined. So that's another thing that has to be dealt with. It's not even just the problem is, though, why the players are in a tough situation, is because it puts the onus on them to not only take the risk, but to say yes as far as money is concerned, because we've seen it all the time, whereas fans, for whatever reason, never really jump on the billionaire owners for being greedy, but they'll jump on the players and the athletes in a heartbeat. We've seen this in other sports, and Major League Baseball is the only sport that does not have a salary cap. So, and they also have the strongest union. So, the union is going to fight tooth and nail for their players. So, it's just a whole big, it's a big situation, because we're not just talking about money. We're talking about health. We're talking about the logistics of testing. It's a lot of day, and can you even play at your home stadium right now? Because we have two teams in New York right here that possibly can't play in their home stadiums. You probably have another one in the Red Sox that probably can't play in Boston right now. It's a slippery slope right now, and the players are on the tough end of it.
Let me just wrap this up in a little bit of a bow right over here before we move on. I
mean, Anthony brought up the Korean League. The only reason those guys are able to get going is because they were able to test on the grand scale that this country still has not been able to do.
Yeah, and I'm not going to get really political with these angles here. I'm going to kind of look at it more towards the point of the players, and I think nobody understands this, and we'll see this when basketball and hockey try to get into their seasons. Hockey has almost already said that they want to just go into a postseason. The logistics of it, not just testing, but to go into a different pay scale, to go into a situation where they're not going to play in front of fans. Owners are going to want money back. I think it's a tough situation. And honestly, I really have I've thought about this and never actually said this publicly. I think a lot of these leagues should cut their losses for 2020 because baseball is definitely not going to be the same in this year alone. And I think salvaging this season is really not worth the public health risk. I want to see it. I really want to see it. But I don't know if it's going to be worth the lives of a lot of people. There's not just players out there. There's people who work in the stadium who are going to have to be there. There's managers. There's announcers.
Umpires.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the risk is not worth the reward here. I actually really do feel bad for the players. I think we've all made this situation. The owners were first. The owners jumped on this. The owners probably went a little ahead of schedule. They didn't need to. And now they put the players in a position where they've already heard some people on ESPN. I think Mark Teixeira said, if you don't play for 50%, you're ruining the sport of baseball for all fans. I'm like, so
you know what?
No,
come on.
It's not.
They survived
multiple
strikes.
Yeah,
Stop it.
Exactly. Former players should not comment on this whatsoever. Also, fun fact for you. If the baseball season doesn't get started, Prince Fielder will be the highest paid player in baseball this year because he will be paid $22 million without a salary cut. Fun fact. Let's keep going.
Really?
But
here's my one, takeaway from this question. You bring up salaries. If the season doesn't happen, does Bobby Bonilla still get paid?
Bobby Bonilla always gets paid. Absolutely. Also, one thing I want to think about is, yes, I've heard that Bobby Bonilla joke many times from people. One thing I also want to mention there's some good trades, like Mookie Betts may not be a Dodger. The Dodgers are definitely not going to be playing in their stadium because their mayor has pretty much said he pretty much doesn't want any sports to happen in their area until 2021. I don't know why people want to play in empty stadiums. I think it's a selfish way to salvage money, and I don't know if it's necessary. Final thoughts before we move on, quickly.
Here's the thing, and look, the owners obviously are trying to it's a business for them. They don't want to go a full season and have to take that loss, have that, that entire season be read in the ledger for them. They don't want that. But I think they also understand that part of what will help the country heal and move forward is if sports can somehow, even if it's just for television purposes, so that people who are still quarantined can watch sports, it does have a positive effect on society, especially baseball and the place it holds. So from that standpoint, I understand it, but I agree with you on this, Rabbi. At the end of the day, as much as we may all want to have it back in some shape, manner, or form because we desperately miss it and what it means to the country, the juice has to be worth the squeeze. And if it's not even by this much, no.
No, it's absolutely not. And this is going to be a very interesting situation, guys, for weeks to come. Guys, it's 8 o'clock. So on this show, we'll talk episodes 5 through 8 of The Last Dance. No one's really ever talked about it, so we'll be the first ones to give you a little bit of a talking about this show. No one ever talks about Jordan.
Nah. It's to us to hear about it.
No, it's only us. As always, view us on Facebook at facebook.com/onthesportslines so you can see us live there. Or if you want to wait, youtube.com/onthesportslines for shows from past and present. Let's continue the show with a continuation of our Best of New York History series. With the metropolitan area not seeing a pro sports championship in almost a decade, 8 years is almost a decade to me, we've decided to give some love to the teams who've had great seasons but didn't end with a championship. One rule to this list is simple. Your single-season team must not have won a championship. There, I mansplained it for both of you. Anyway, the team did not have to lose in the finals championship game or series to be on this list. A fact we'll see with all of our picks tonight. Each of us gets 2 picks. Anthony, you start us off at pick number 1.
Well, my first pick is near and dear to me as a Met fan. It's the 2006 New York Mets, and I remember the slogan, the team, the time, the Mets. And, you know, it was so funny because going into that season, Mike Piazza was gone. He left field free agency. Now you have Paul LaDuca that comes in and takes over. A couple of Mike Cameron, who was very popular with the Mets during his tenure, was gone. And also Braden Looper, another guy who was a closer for a few years, was pretty much gone. But in came Billy Wagner, who was an all-star. And the Mets, for what it's worth, being managed the second year by Willie Randolph, had missed the playoffs the previous year by 4 games. They missed the wild card by 4 games, and they were kind of a team on the rise. But they got to winning 8 of the first 9 games to start the season, and finished April 16-8, including splitting 3 games to the Atlanta Braves. But by July, they were starting to run away with the division. They won 17 games in the month of July. The only blemish on the whole season was the month of June, where they were 15 and 12 respectively. They cruised to 97 games, won the NL East by 12 games, which was tied for the best record in the majors. Which, by the way, the Yankees were also the other team that won 97 games in the regular season in a very loaded American League, which saw about 5 or 6 teams that won close to 90 games or above 90 games. The Mets was the clear-cut favorites going into the playoffs that season. You think about Carlos Beltran with a career-high 41 home runs. Carlos Delgado added 38. They had so much pop in that lineup. Tom Glavine, Steve Trachsel, we kind of forget about him.
Yeah.
We chipped in with 15 wins apiece to lead the team. But what happened was you slowly started to see the Mets somewhat unglued. Pedro Martinez went down on the All-Star break, and he was not available for the postseason. Then prior to the playoffs, Orlando El Duque, who was supposed to start the first game of the Dodgers series, he went down and was lost for the remainder of the playoffs. So you was calling on unsung pitchers like John Maine and Oliver Perez to start playoff games when they're barely been pitching the entire regular season. But then you look at how everything was coming into play for the Mets. I mean, you looked at like Julio, the Julio Francos and the Jose Valentines, those seasoned veterans that had Chet Dan, David Wright, and Jose Reyes was all-stars that season. David Wright, 26 home runs. Jose Reyes led the league in steals. It was like that team could, like the only team that could beat the Mets that year, it felt like, were the Mets themselves. Because
they did well with that.
I'm getting there. But then they sweep the Dodgers 3 straight. Tom Glavine pitched a gem in game 2. We forget about that one. And then they get to the NLCS against a Cardinal team that just barely made the playoffs. Like they were literally got in on the second to last day of the season, and they won game 1. Let game 2 slip away. Billy Wagner gave up a home run in extra innings. And then won only 1 of the 3 games in St. Louis, but managed to win game 6. Of course, we know how game 7 ended. Carlos Beltran got a call third strike. But even the inning itself was like a microcosm of misery for Met fans. They got the bases loaded after the home run in the top half of the inning by Yadier Molina. And this is after the Andy Chavez catch that kept the game tied. It was just like, it was one of the most excruciating ways to end what should have been a magical season for the Mets. But then you look at the hangover. The next year, 2007, they blew a 7-game lead with 17 to play. And in 2008, they managed to do the exact same thing and lost to the Marlins on the last day of the season both years. So
basically, you're laying the blame for all of this at the feet of the 06 team. I hear. I get. Yeah. Okay, I'm getting.
Yeah,
that's what
the 2000. Yeah, it started with the 2016. It just seemed like they never really recovered from that NLCS loss. It reminds you of the '88 Mets team that lost to the Dodgers, who they literally beat 12 in a row in the regular season and still could not beat them in 7 games.
All
But
right.
this Mets team was just stacked, and the way the season ended, the Mets, yeah.
It's funny, as when Anthony, Rabbi laid down this pick, I kind of had to like go back into the recesses of my memory and then go into baseballreference.com, which is where I go for everything related to baseball. And it's funny, like you forget all of these names that like had these really good seasons. I mean, you talked about Reyes, Anthony. I mean, 30 doubles, 17 triples, 19 homers, 81 RBI, and 64 steals out of the leadoff spot. I mean, hands down, probably his best season of his career. I mean, Wright was right. And I hear Met fans. I remember Met fans talking like, "Oh man, if only Cliff Floyd had played more than 97 games." And the injuries that this team took and still managed to do as well as they did, to get to where they got. I mean, yeah, is it gut punching to, do what you did on top of everything that went down and still to come up short to the Cards? I mean, and it's the Cardinals. So, that losing to them in a playoff series holds a special, place in the ninth circle of hell for Met fans. But yeah, I mean, if a team that like almost, but not quite, yeah, it's them.
Yeah, and some funny things about that team. First of all, good mention. I forgot how good the Yankees were that year and how disappointing the 06 postseason was. Yankees lost to the Tigers in 4 games. And a terrible ALDS. You are shortchanging how bad the Cardinals were that year. They were 83 and 79. They ended up winning the World
Series. It's even worse for a Mets team to lose to them.
They won the World Series in 5 games, and again, they lost to an 83 and 79 team, and easily. And you mentioned the 1988 Mets; they're a good example. That this is easily the best Met team to not win a title. I think this is a good season for Willie Randolph, probably easily the best season, but when you have a season like this, it kind of spirals into and out of control. And Anthony mentioned it very well. 97 to 98, or 07 and 08 were kind of caused by the 06 team. And this is why the Mets right now are still the Mets. Sorry about that.
Yeah, and you know what? They make the playoffs almost a decade after this. So, yeah. Pretty much.
And that 15 team could have also been in consideration. Jay, you have pick number 2.
Yeah, so both of my picks have one thing in common. They were the team that ended a dynasty-type run of championships. One temporarily, the other, well, the drought continues. Up first for me, so we're going to have to, call Doctor Who, jump into the TARDIS, and do a serious throwback Thursday time travel all the way back to 1954. Hey, it's a TARDIS. It goes anywhere in space and time.
Sure.
And a Yankees team that won 103 games and didn't win the pennant, losing out to a Cleveland Indians team that won 111, which ended a World Series title run that went from 1949 to 1953. I mean, this Yankee team led the American League with 805 runs. It's over almost 5.25 a game. Their offense was number 1 in all 3 slash categories: batting average, on base, homers, second in extra bases, homers, total bases. Pitching staff was second in wins and shutouts, first in saves, third in ERA, runs allowed, and homers allowed. They had 6 All-Stars on this team: Hank Bauer, Yogi Berra, Whitey Ford, Mikey Mantle, and Allie Reynolds, and Irv Norvin, who none of y'all will know. 5 future Hall of Famers. Phil Rizzuto and Eno Slaughter, who's the end of his career. I mean, think about this. In this day and age, 103 wins makes the playoffs. At least it's a wild card. Yankee teams of recent vintage have done that. 54 was still the era of 154 game seasons. No divisions, no wild card team to finish first. Wins the pennant, goes straight to the World Series. This team only spent 5 total days in first place the entire season, yet they never had a losing streak of more than 3 games. Their home and road splits were crazy. They played 700 ball at home and over 630 ball on the road. Their only losing month was April. September was 14 and 10. But I mean, this is what happens when you go 11 and 11 and have a negative run differential against the team that's in front of you. I mean, you take the Yankees out of this equation. The Yankees win the AL pennant. It would have extended their run to 10 straight American League pennants. Here's the ironic thing. The 103 wins in 54 was the first time they topped 100 wins since 1942 when they went 103 and 51 and won the World Series. That stretch from 49 to 53, they won 5 straight World Series, never more than 99 games. You win 103 games and don't win the pennant, that is saying something. Hashtag best team to not win it all.
You know what? When you win 103 games and still finish second, I think that's more of an indictment on the team that's ahead of you than anything you've done wrong. Like, come on, you cannot, like, how real can a season be? You play 700 baseball and still come up in second place. Like, even
by 8 games, no less.
Yeah, and I mean, like I said, like, that is a great example of being good and still not being good enough. That's like, that's like basically getting an A-, but your sibling got an A+. Like, you came out short still, regardless. Even though for today's standards, 103 wins is like home field advantage throughout the playoffs. Yeah, you know, I don't know what else to say. Like, you win 103 games, and the team in front of you win 111. That kind of stinks, because that's just the luck of a bad year to be that good.
I have 2 Yankee teams that I want to, because we didn't pick more than one of the same team in this list. Throughout the night, I'm going to pick some honorable mentions of each team, and I'm going to see what you guys think. I thought when you originally said a team that didn't make it to the World Series or didn't make it to the playoffs, I thought you were going to go with the 94 Yankees, the team that got affected by the strike. And I think that team started the dynasty that really started rolling. I mean, 95 was a tough year, and that brought in Joe Torre from Buck Showalter, but 94 Yankees would have been a good choice for here. The 01 Yankees, who were within minutes of winning a World Series, would have been another good choice here. It's funny with the franchise like the Yankees, guys, you don't really notice a lot of the failures because of all of the successes. And to me, and given I'm a little younger and I don't remember a lot of stuff pre-1990s, but you see a lot of failure for the Yankees, especially after that core 4 era. But those teams I never really considered good ones. The 01 team, I would only put in that conversation because of how close they were to a World Series and how the Mr. November talk and how they magically won those games against Arizona. It was just on TV the other night. But I can understand putting the 54, putting a 100-win team on here is easily a good pick, especially, as we just mentioned with Anthony, how 83-win teams end up winning the World Series in the wild card era. Final thoughts, guys? None.
Yeah, I know I mentioned the 06 Yankees earlier when I was talking about the Mets. That Yankee team won 97 games, and it was a down year for A-Rod. Like, you hit 260 and 30 home runs. That's a great year for anybody. Like, we'll talk about the Last Dance. I'm watching people praising Michael Jordan for batting 200. But A-Rod is getting destroyed for batting 260 with 30 home runs and over 100 RBIs. But
apples and tomatoes, Anthony. Apples and tomatoes with that comparison.
But I mean, come on. Like, look at that Yankee team at 97 wins, and they lost to equally lesser Detroit Tiger team, and they didn't just lost. They was destroyed.
They were.
2 games in Detroit. It got so bad. And that's why Vegas batted 8th in the lineup. 8th. In the lineup. That was the talk after the Tigers were that the Yankees knocked them out of the playoffs. Was A-Rod dropping the 8? Jeter only had 3 hits in that series. It was a really bad way to lose a playoff series after a great regular season.
Rabbi, you talk about the 94 team that got, screwed over by the strike, and how much were we all looking forward to a potential Yankees Expos World Series. I mean, that would have been awesome. There were so many things that just didn't happen. I mean, I really wanted to see Tony Gwynn hit 400 that year, and I got a feeling he would have done it. But, I mean, if you want to talk about teams that were just good enough but not quite to get over the hump, I mean, look at the 95 Yankee team. Don Mattingly's last chance. I mean, if there's a team that is even more like, only just a little bit more, Mattingly may have had a chance to finally play in a World Series. So I mean, there's a lot of Yankee teams, just in your lifetime where they were this close, but as Maxwell Smart used to say, missed it by that much.
All right.
You can throw the old three Yankees.
Don't know who Maxwell Smart is? Go look it up.
I know who Maxwell Smart is.
I don't remember that, by the way.
Yeah. I remember who Maxwell Smart was. He was played by Steve Carell in the movie. All right, moving on. I have 2 picks in a row here as it is a steak draft. My first pick is going to be a team I referenced to last week, and it's the New York Knicks. But not the season you would think. A lot of people would say the 93-94 season is easily the best team not to win a championship. I'm going to go a year before that and go with the 92-93 team. Here's why. First of all, 93-94 was the only season without MJ. And I don't want to ever put an asterisk on Knicks title runs, but you do have an asterisk on that 94 and 99 team. The 94 team just beat the Bulls in the 7-game series and made a very huge run because of the lockout-shortened season of 99. So that's one. Number two, you have to look at what this Knicks team did when you look at it. Best record in the 92-93 season, and they are the first team and the only team to beat the MJ-led Bulls team in regular season record. They were one of only 2 teams to ever actually have home court advantage in a series against that era's Bulls. They had a lot of free agent signings that year. Doc Rivers, Charles Smith, Ronaldo Bachman came in on this team. It was probably Pat Riley.
Not Bachman.
Blackman. Damn it. All right, whatever. Anyway, Pat Riley was the coach of the year that year. And, of course, as you might have seen publicized in The Last Dance a lot of times, I almost tried to erase that part from my head. They had a 2-0 lead against the Bulls, and they probably would have won the East if it weren't for the media attention driving the hell out of Michael Jordan after he made that trip to Atlantic City. As I mentioned, I'm not picking the 93-94 team. I'm picking the best season of Patrick Ewing, 60-22, 37-4 in the Garden. And to see a Knicks team play that well at home now would be shocking. And again, it set the stage for the 93-94 team because with that playoff experience, they had 2 7-game series, got themselves to the NBA Finals. But that 92-93 team really set the stage and really could have easily been that one and only team to beat MJ on that 6th title reign. The only team that came as close as that is the Utah Jazz. Remember, the Bulls have only been involved in the 7th game once. But in that series against the Pacers never led that series. The Knicks led the series 2-0, and they're the only team to actually be up at least 2 games in that title run against MJ.
Yeah.
Well, I would definitely talk about the 93 Knicks. I mean, we think of Charles Smith. I think we all know about what happened towards the end of Game 5. But then one of the caveats about those Knicks teams in the 90s, and obviously I'm a Knicks fan, I know, was that for as good as they were defensively, they were terrible offensively. Like, outside of Patrick Ewing and even John Starks, who by that year came into his own. You added in Anthony Mason, of course, and Charles Oakley. The Knicks really won with defense. And there were plenty of times in that series, particularly that Game 5, where they went to scoring droughts and couldn't get a bucket for like 4 or 5 minutes on end, which was one of the characteristics of that Knicks team, and which is why you looked at so many years where they should have won, that they didn't win championships. And by the way, the Knicks and the Bulls won 7 games in 92, the previous season, with Xavier McDaniel on that team. And that was kind of the start of that Knick-Bull rivalry. But you think about the 93 Knicks, 60 wins. That was like second in the league to a 64-win Phoenix Suns team led by Charles Barkley, who won MVP that year. And you understand this, the Knicks won 3 out of 4 from the Bulls that season. Like, the only loss was really against Chicago, was a Christmas Day game against the Bulls. But they have really they had played the Bulls as well as you possibly could during the regular season, including beating about 30 in one of the matchups early in the early season game where Jordan started to kind of get banged up the season. He had twisted his ankle that game. Then he had the wrist injury throughout the playoffs that was pretty noticeable. But also, when you look at that league, they were the number one defensive team in the league. They went through Indiana in 4 games, and that kind of started that little rivalry with Reggie Miller. Then they beat a really tough game Charlotte Hornet team that was coming off of Alonzo Mourning's buzzer beater against, which pretty much ended the Boston Celtics as we knew them. Has that great Celtic team in the 80s. And then they get the 2-0 lead to Chicago. And it was a fact that they followed up with 2 strong performances with a stinker in Game 3.
Yes.
They got blown out in a game where Michael Jordan shot 3 for 18. And then we know what happened. Game 4, he goes over 54 points. And by that time, the Bulls had all the momentum. I think the Knicks relied too much on a home court advantage, knowing that they were going back to the Garden for Game 5 with 2 of the last 3 at Madison Square Garden. And you know what? Give B.J. Armstrong a lot of credit because he hit the game winner towards the end of Game 5 in a game that was going really back and forth throughout the fourth quarter. But also, here's another thing. The Knicks missed 10 free throws in that game that turned out to be a big difference. And then the Bulls finished it off in Game 6. It was a disappointing way to end a great season, but the Knicks had their chances. But you can't let Michael Jordan off the mat once you have him down.
You know, it's a funny thing. You know, you talk about this team, Rabbi, and we've talked about the '94 team. You know, on previous shows. I have a running thread with some guys that I used to play basketball with back in the day. We all went to the same summer camp together, and one of the things that we've been talking about recently was, you know, Ewing and where does he fit, and you know, in terms of the overall, you know, pantheon of centers and players, and you know. Is this possibly Ewing's best team? Hard to say. I mean, look, number 1 in defense, but they were atrocious on offense. Why? Because this team, like the one that came after it, was ridiculously reliant on Ewing. When you look at, I mean, you can talk about Ewing's numbers. I mean, he averaged 24 a game in the regular season. Starks was next at 17.5. You look at the disparity in field goal attempts. Ewing averaged 19 field goal attempts per game. Starks averaged 14. You know, I mean, there's no one else really on Starks could shoot you into a game just as easily as he could shoot you out. And this team was way too reliant on defense. And Ewing as a guy who needed others to get him the ball in order to be effective, you had a team that didn't really have tier 1 guys who could facilitate and get him the ball. The Bulls had guys like Jordan, like Pippen, who could create their own offense, did not need someone else to set them up. And at the end of the day, if you need somebody to get a bucket and you have got guys who can make their own offense off the bounce are always going to take it from guys who need other people to facilitate. I mean, this was probably Ewing's best chance. In his era, this is probably the best team and the closest he got without actually getting to the finals. The only reason, Rabbi, that I give the nod to the team that came the year after is because they actually got to the finals, got to a 7th game, and then just couldn't put it away because 2 words, John Starks.
Yeah, and we've talked about that a lot. I figured you guys would mention the 93-94 team, but I have to give a nod to how really good the 92-93 team is. No one really mentions that in this context of in the context of all of the great Knicks teams. So I think it's still a pretty worthy pick. All right, I have a second pick. And this pick is going to be a very interesting one because as a Giants fan, I don't necessarily always want to pick a team like the Jets, but I'm going to. The 98-99 Jets were hella strong. And let's talk about them for a second. 12-4. It was, believe it or not, their first division title since the AFL-NFL merger. That really develops a long time.
Wow.
This is Curtis Martin's first season as a Jet. He became a Jets legend. They picked him up at free agency from the Patriots. Do you guys remember who the starting quarterback was the year before? All right. No guesses.
The year before?
Year before, 97. That is correct. Neil O'Donnell was the starter. So they signed Vinny Testaverde in free agency. However, Glenn Foley was the starter for this team, and he went 2-3 as a starter. Vinny permanently came in Game 6. Vinny actually came in Game 3 in relief of Foley. Vinny was 11-1 in games that he was primarily at quarterback that year. Up to that time, only one other team had defeated 7 teams in the regular season who would go on to make the playoffs, and that's what the Jets did. In fact, the current AFC East, that would be the Jets, the Bills, the Dolphins, and the Patriots, all made the playoffs that year. So talk about a strong division. And the 5th team, by the way, in that old AFC East, the Indianapolis Colts in Peyton Manning's rookie season. Talk about Bill Parcells going from 1-15 2 years before that, turned into 9-7, went to 12-4. And remember, this team was up 10-0 going into halftime of the AFC Championship game against the Broncos, who would go back and win, score 23 unanswered. And that Broncos team was one of the best teams ever. They were 14-2. They easily beaten the Falcons in the Super Bowl. The Jets could have easily beaten the Falcons in the Super Bowl. I truly believe the Jets were the second best team in the NFL that year. And remember that Vinny Testaverde goal line sneak in the game against the Seattle Seahawks?
Yes.
Yeah, that started.
You mean a touchdown that really should have been a touchdown?
Yeah, that started instant replay, gentlemen. It hasn't left since because of how bad a call that was. So there's a lot of teams that Jets team. There's a lot of reasons that Jets team was memorable. I can't go for the Mark Sanchez teams because Mark Sanchez and also the Jets didn't win their division that year. But this Jets team, who again has never actually made the Super Bowl since they made it to Super Bowl III, this was the closest team to win the Super Bowl. I think it's a very good pick.
Yeah, no, I mean, I can't argue that fact with you, Rabbi. I mean, it's a team that, I mean, unless you're a diehard Jets or NFL fan, most teams don't actually remember. I mean, Vinny had one of his better years. I mean, Vinny, who was so prone to throwing to people in the other jersey, he only had 7 interceptions that year against 29 touchdowns. I mean, everybody talks about Curtis Martin. I mean, and yeah, hellacious year, toting the rock. I can't remember the last time a starting running back got 369 carries in a year. But I mean, this is a Jets team that actually had guys on the perimeter. I mean, Keyshawn, 1,100 plus yards and 10 touchdowns. Wayne Krebet, almost 1,108 touchdowns. They actually had guys who could move the ball down the field. Vinny, I gotta say, I had to go back and look over his numbers, and one of his better years overall, his quarterback rating for that year was 101.6. And this was an excellent, excellent team. I mean, not a lot of people, everybody looked at the offense. It's funny, you go back and you check, the defense did just enough. I mean, nobody in double digits in sacks. Mo Lewis led them with 11. Aaron Glenn was in his prime as the guy on the island prior to Revis. He had 6 picks that year. This team just, put it together in a competitive division, and I got to give it to them. Fifth in offense and second in defense. Would it have been interesting? Could they have gotten any further? Who knows? But you know what? It is definitely one of the better Jets teams, in recent memory.
Yeah, I just think about that 98 Jet team and how it was a characteristic of Bill Parcells. He had some of, what you call Parcells guys on that team. But Brian Cox, you had David Meggett, who was kind of like the guy that's kind of plucked away from New England on that team as well, along with Curtis Martin. You had a defense that, they weren't spectacular and didn't blow you away, but they got the job done. I remember that late in the season, they went into Miami on a Sunday night and beat the Dolphins. And then they went into Orchard Park about 6 days later and beat a really good Bills team led by Doug Flutie on the road to win the division. You think about how great that Jet team was, and they had the Broncos right where they wanted them, but they were up 10-0. they didn't have to worry about an aerial attack because the wind was blowing, 30 miles per hour and mile high. No one could throw the football. They had the advantage. They even blocked a punt that led to a 1-yard touchdown run by Curtis Martin that kind of gave them that 10-0 lead. But then they gave up a big passing play to Ed McCaffrey from John Elway that kind of kickstarted the Broncos offense. But then they turned the ball over 5 times in that game, including 3 in the second half. That pretty much became their undoing. I don't like you think about what happened the following year with Vinny Testaverde. He tore his Achilles in the opening game of the season, and a Jet team that went into the following year with Super Bowl aspirations ended up settling for an 8-8 season after losing the star quarterback. And Keyshawn Johnson was no longer a Jet after that season, and we all kind of knew what happened in football stars. He went into retirement for seemingly the umpteenth time before he came out to coaching. But that 98 Jet team was really, even as a Giant fan, I always thought that Jet team was really special. By the way, that was the first year they had brought back those Joe Namath-like uniforms.
Yeah.
The 98 season was the first year they switched back to those unis. But you think about how this year started. They started out 1-2. They actually started out 0-2.
Yeah, started out 0-2, yeah.
Games. And even when they were 2-3, they made the quarterback switch, and the offense kind of took over. Glenn Foley started turning the ball over. I think that was the main reason why that he lost his starting job. But Testaverde was he didn't just put up the numbers. He was efficient. And then you look at the fact that you had the ground game, the aerial attack, and the defense to win a Super Bowl, and not being able to get it done in Denver, kind of put a solid note on a Jet team that was really good. But because of how the season ended and the fact that they would have 2 more Jet teams that would get to the AFC title game to lose, they get kind of lost in history. By the way, that Bronco team actually started, 13-0?
Until the Giants beat him in that
until the
Giants.
Yeah, the Giants started making a habit of beating unbeaten teams for whatever reason. But that Jet team was probably the one team in the NFL that season that could match the Denver Broncos from at every position. It just didn't get it done.
Yep, it could not. And one more note before we move on. Birth of Bill Belichick when Bill Parcells quitting after he said he resigned as the HC of the NYJ. Jay, you have another pick. Let's hear what you have for pick 2.
I do. And, for my second pick, I'm going to move from the diamond to the ice, and I'm going to look at the 83-84 Islanders, whose loss to Gretzky's Edmonton Oilers in the Stanley Cup Finals prevented the Isles from owning Lord Stanley's Chalice for a 5th straight year. This Islander team won 50 games, had 104 points. They won the Patrick Division. You guys, do you remember the good old days when the NHL's divisions were named for people who actually built the sport? I miss those days. It made the NHL unique. They were number 3 in goals for, number 4 in goals allowed. They had 2 110-plus point scores in right wing Mike Bossy at 118, center Brian Trottier with 111. These guys were 2 of the best players of their generation. They had 8 guys who topped 20 goals, led by Bossy's 51, Trottier's 40. In that stretch, Bossy was one of the most prolific snipers in NHL history before Gretzky came in and redefined what that meant. They had one of the best blue liners to ever play the game in Dennis Potvin, who had 22 goals and 63 assists. It was unheard of back in the day for a defenseman to have 85 points. They had 6 future Hall of Famers, Bossy, Trottier, Potvin, goalie Billy Smith, left wing Clark Gillies, and an 18-year-old Pat LaFontaine was part of that team.
3rd pick of the first round that year, by the way.
That's right. This is a team, think about this. This is a team that averaged almost 109 points per season from 74-75 to 78-79, and they couldn't even get out of the 70s. Yet, during their 4 straight years of winning the Stanley Cup from 79-80 to 82-83, they only averaged 104 points a season. It just seemed like once this particular group for this stretch got into the playoffs, there was no stopping them. Their offensive stars would step up their game, and Billy Smith, say what you want, the dude could stand on his head and steal a series like no one else, could during that 4-year run. Then they run into the Oilers in 83-84. that team is ready to, begin their dominance, kind of like the Bulls finally knocking off the Pistons as we, foreshadow into our next segment. Gretzky had 87 goals, 118 assists. That's 205 points, guys. I mean, the Oilers that year were the Jordan Bulls or the Steph Warriors. That is how insanely good they were. Their stars were better than the Islanders' stars. Grant Fuhr stood on his head better than Billy Smith. And when it was all said and done, the Islanders' run came to an end just as the Oilers' run got started. I don't know, guys. You win 4 straight Stanley Cups, and then the run ends in a 5th straight finals appearance. That is a hell of a run. And again, to me, hashtag best team to not win it all.
Well, I mean, if you're going to get dethroned, I mean, you might as well go out on your shield. And it's kind of like a passing of choice. You think about it, it led to the end of one dynasty and the beginning of another dynasty. And we talk about how the Island, obviously I won a Ranger jersey. Now we had to wait 54 years between Stanley Cup wins. The Islanders almost immediately was good the moment they got into the league, and they reeled off 4 straight Stanley Cups. But there was really good. And we're talking about Al Auburn, the kind of the architect behind those Stanley Cup championships. Yep. Trust me, my niece never listened to me hear the end of it. But it's just like, hey, they lost. They didn't get a chance to get to the 5th championship, but they lost to a team that became a dynasty win itself as well. For a decade, we pretty much had only two teams win a Stanley Cup in the 80s, and that is incredible. You never see dynasties in today's sports because of the dynamic and the landscape of with free agency and salary cap restrictions that kind of keep you from keeping teams together for long periods of time. And those other teams were together for about 5, 6 years during that Stanley Cup run.
Yep.
Yeah, I agree with this pick, even though the Islanders kind of got blown out in the Stanley Cup Finals. They lost their last 3 games, I believe 7-1, 6-1, and 5-2. But that just showed, again, the Edmonton Oilers were essentially the 2015 Warriors, and they were a juggernaut. I can't make a case for them, but I will give a little nod to the 92-93 Islanders that made it to the Eastern Conference Finals. To the Eastern Conference Finals because of their big upset at Pittsburgh. Or no, they beat Montreal, I believe, and almost got upset by Pittsburgh, but that team was an 87-win team or an 87-point team, so I don't really think that really qualifies. This was a very good choice, Jay, just by, logic alone. If you win 4 Stanley Cups and you go to a 5th one, that's a very good choice for this pick. Anthony, we have one more pick, and it's yours. Who you got?
Wow, my last pick, I'm going to go with the 2008 New York Giants. And I keep this in mind. The New York Giants have won the Super Bowl 4 times. The 2008 team is the only team to have made the playoffs following a Super Bowl win for the Giants in their franchise history. You think about this is a team that was coming off the momentum of pulling off one of the biggest Super Bowl upsets and beating the previously unbeaten Patriots in Super Bowl 42 just 7 months earlier. But then Michael Strahan retires. Obviously, that was his last game. Jeremy Shockey is gone. He's traded in the offseason. But O.C. Mayorga, the team's lone Pro Bowler from that Super Bowl 42 win season, tears his ACL in a preseason game against the Jets. So he was lost for the year. But then you think about a combined 13 Pro Bowlers from 3 guys who are no longer on the roster, and all the this Giant team did was get out to an 11-1 start. And the lone loss was a stinker on Monday Night Football in Cleveland. But you think about how good that Giant team was. 3 games against 3 of the toughest defenses in the league, Dallas, Philadelphia, and Baltimore, respectively. They ran for 200 yards in each game. They had remember the combination of Oath, Wind, and Fire backfield, Brandon Jacobs, Derek Ward, and Ahmad Bradshaw. Mm-hmm. Ward and Jacobs both ran for 1,000 yards. One of the first tangibles to do that. Eli Manning had one of his best seasons coming off of an incredible postseason run where he made his first Pro Bowl, and Justin Tuck kind of emerged as a superstar pass rusher, and he made the Pro Bowl. And also, the Giants, I think the Giants are maybe the 3rd team to beat both Super Bowl participants that season on the road. Keep this in mind. They went to Arizona and beat the Cardinals. They went into Pittsburgh, sorry, Jay, and upset the Steelers in a game. They forced 4 interceptions from Ben Roethlisberger. They were clearly the team to beat, and then Plaxico Burress happens. The night of November 29th, he shoots himself in the leg accidentally in a nightclub. He has to be deactivated for the season. And the Giants offense kind of went with him because they lost 4 of the next 5 games. The lone victory after that came in a thriller against Carolina that got them home field advantage. But then the playoffs came around. They were not the same team. It was painfully obvious. They came against a red-hot Philadelphia Eagle team that pretty much was playing playoff games because they had to win the last 4 games and had a bunch of tiebreakers fall their way to get into the playoffs. And they humiliated the Cowboys in Week 17. Was a 44-6, and then they beat Minnesota and God rest his soul, Tavares Jackson, and in the wild card round in the playoffs and shut down A.J. Peterson. That go back to that playoff game. If the Giants maybe score 1 offensive touchdown, the game is differently. But it was a field goal game. They had the opportunities. They could not get in the end zone. And then in the fourth quarter, Philadelphia was finally able to pull away, scoring 14 unanswered. And it stuffed the Giants. And here's the thing: the Giants was the top rushing offensive attack in the league, and the Eagles defense stuffed Brandon Jacobs twice on 4th and 1. That pretty much kind of sealed the Giants' fate. It was a great season, a long season that the Giants make the playoffs. They were probably better than the 2 Giant teams that won the Super Bowl, the 10-6 2007 team and the 9-7 2011 team that went on to win the Super Bowl. This 2018 definitely was up there with the 1990 Giants and the 86 team that famously won the Super Bowl, but also the 89 team that went 12-4 and lost in the playoffs to the Los Angeles Rams. Remember Flipper Anderson catching a touchdown and sprinting into the Giants Stadium tunnel to beat them in overtime. When you look at the Giants, that 2018, that was a missed opportunity for the Giants to go back-to-back because they were clearly the best team in the NFC without question that season, and pretty much had their way with the division. But an off the field incident kind of turned that season upside down by the beginning of December.
Yeah, it's funny, Anthony, you talk about that team, and that team was ridiculously reliant on the running game. No receiver on that team topped 600 yards. So, I mean, in a way, they were kind of, they were an outlier in the NFL, even in that, even back in 2008. And, you talk about just not having it. You and I both know, we've seen it happen before. Team runs roughshod over the regular season, gets into the playoffs, comes up against a team who may or may not be a good matchup for them, and they just don't have it. I mean, the number of times that, the Giants couldn't score a touchdown. All they had was field goals and a safety. And you talk about those drives, Anthony. I went and looked it up because we were talking about it. 2 interceptions, a fumble, 2 missed field goals, twice turning the ball over on downs. They did not do themselves any favors at all. And, the difference being is that the Eagles got touchdowns when they needed to. They only got 2 of them, but it was enough, because the Giants just could not move the football. And it's unfortunate because they did. They tore through the regular season, and to have it go down when you go out like that and to go out on such a stinker, oh, my God, that's got to hurt. If you're going to go out, you'd rather not go out, you'd rather not go out doing a metaphorical burst and pointing the gun at your foot and shooting it.
Yeah, you talked about the missed opportunities. The opening kickoff, Amar Bradshaw ran it 70 yards and put them in great field position to at least get a touchdown. And then on a 3rd down pass, Eli throws it behind Steve Smith, who was kind of coming into his own. Not that Steve Smith, but the other Steve Smith that we're talking about.
USD's finest.
Also, yeah, I had kind of put the difference out there. But Jay, you talked about it. How we see the teams kind of run through the regular season and run into kind of a buzzsaw. We saw it in this year's playoffs too with the Ravens. They kind of had to win the regular season and ran into a buzzsaw of a Tennessee Titan team that was not intimidated and kind of threw up an egg at the wrong possible time. And it's the same thing that happened with the 2008 Giants.
Yeah, so Jay, kudos for you not mentioning the team that won that season in the NFL, which I believe would be your Steelers. So point to you on that. Number two, notice this is actually a Giants team that played 2 Sunday Night Football games in a row. That game against Carolina was actually flexed in that week 16 because it was essentially for the 1 seed in the playoffs. So this Giants, and this is a funny thing, Eli Manning teams never really had good regular seasons. This was by far his best regular season. They never, he only won another division title, and that was the Super Bowl year of 2012. I am going to put some cold water on this and pick a team that actually made the Super Bowl, actually had the 1 seed, only screwed up because they played one of the best defenses of all time, and that's the 2000 Giants. I loved that.
Nice honorable mention.
It's a very good honorable mention. I think Kerry Collins, I think we kind of really don't look at them in the same light because of how bad they got beaten in Super Bowl 35, and because a lot of things they did that season were kind of fluky, but any team that wins an NFC championship, who I believe was either even in betting lines or an underdog against the Minnesota Vikings team that was pretty much peak Minnesota Vikings with Culpepper and Moss, and beats them 41-0, should get some honorable mention in my book. And also note that was the team that kind of sandwiched the 2 greatest show on turf teams of the Rams in Super Bowl 34 and 36. So let's give a little credit to that team. I know I said not losing the title was not a parameter being picked here, but I think that Giants team really deserved it. All right.
No, it's definitely a great honorable mention because you think about that team, it was 7-4 before Jim Fossey made that guarantee, and they won. They went off and won their last 5 regular season games. And then you talk about the playoffs. Yeah, they beat the Philadelphia Eagles for one of the rare times when you see a team beat a divisional opponent three times in a regular season. And they were the underdogs going into that NFC Championship game against the Vikings, and to shut them out 41-0. Definitely one of the great moments in Giants history. But yeah, unfortunately, they stunk it up against the Ravens, who were arguably one of the greatest defenses of all time. And Kerry Collins had a great season, 20 touchdowns, going 12 interceptions, coming off a time where his career was kind of spiraling out of control and kind of resuscitated his career. We saw the emergence of Monty Tuma and Killian. That was really the first year Tiki Barber really was the main go-to guy, paired up with Ron Dane, who also added 800 yards as a rookie. And you talk about that defense, really not a big contribution from Michael Strahan. He only had 8 sacks that year and did not make the Pro Bowl. But that Giants defense was really good enough. They were, 8th? They were in the top 10 overall. But the job they did against the Vikings, and it pretty much got Sean Payton a coaching job. And what he was able to do with that Giant offense. Also, John Fox, honorable mention. He pretty much became the Carolina Panthers coach after that defensive game plan that literally fizzled out a Viking team that had scored 49 points the week before in a playoff win against Arizona. It was just New Orleans, the Saints that they beat. It was just a tremendous performance. Unfortunately, we only remember the 34-7 shellac and they took down in Tampa.
Yeah. Well, hey, as you guys know, Giant fans prefer to not really remember the Kerry Collins era. So,
I do remember the Kerry Collins era. That team, again, the only Giant team to lose in the Super Bowl, which is kind of I hate Ray Lewis. Moving on, let's finish tonight's show again with a topic that none of us have ever talked about ever, and it's never been a social media thing. The Last Dance. No. So The Last Dance. The series actually ends this Sunday. Man, how time has flied. Episodes 5 through 8 went through a lot. Here's a quick recap. It's the heart of MJ's first three-peat, the Dream Team, MJ's Atlantic City trip, MJ's retirement, MJ playing baseball, MJ's comeback, and the historic 95 and 96 season. There was a ton to process. I'm going to start with Anthony this time. What is your take on all that we've just seen?
Oh, wow. You know what my take on all this, and I've actually praised the documentary for this, is that we're seeing that, you know what? Michael Jordan is human. We are seeing that, yes, he is flawed. We're seeing the relationship he had with his teammates and how he wasn't the greatest teammate in the world, even though it led to, obviously, championship success. We're seeing him pretty much make mistakes off the court. Remember the check he gave to a friend that became kind of the smoking gun to the whole gambling allegations during the '93 playoffs. But also we also saw like how what he went through as far as his father's tragic death as well, and kind of how that played into his first retirement. Look, I remember Ebony magazine that my sister had years ago. It was from November 1992. In that article, he hinted at wanting to retire early because they have played so many games during that stretch. You think about it, when you're winning consecutive championships, you're playing a lot of games. Then you throw in the Dream Team, and by the time he won that third championship, he was just mentally burnt out. But you saw that his father's passing really did take a hard toll on him as much as anything, and it led to him retiring. But we also saw Jordan being somewhat of a bad. I think you probably talk about this some more. Being a bit of a bully to his teammates. I mean, we're seeing a little bit of Jordan being a bit of a hypocrite because part of his beef with Isaiah Thomas was because of Thomas' tough approach to the game, and obviously the snub handshakes at the end of the 91 conference finals. But we're seeing Jordan almost being the exact same thing behind closed doors. We're talking about the Steve Kerr incident in practice. And it reminds me that Jordan went through this at a time where there was no social media. Sports wasn't a 24-hour thing. But also, you keep this in mind, that Jordan is also getting a lot of slack for things that we kind of tell today's players down with as well, especially as far as a bullying culture that's been established. I could imagine Steph Curry or LeBron James or today's NBA athletes getting away with, picking at the teammates to the point where Jordan is telling stewards not to feed Horace Grant on the plane rides back home after games. But these stories have been around for years. This is the first time that the current and the younger generation are starting to hear things like this. And you know what? It's given a new perspective to Michael Jordan in the fact that you can be the greatest player of all time, just may not be the greatest person, to say the least, off the court.
And you talk about Anthony, and what stood out for me at the end of all of that, and I don't remember which one of his former teammates said it when, was he a jerk? Yeah, but he kind of had to be. He was the guy who had to push. He couldn't be the nice guy if he was going to push his teammates. And while they may not have always appreciated it, they did understand where he was coming from. This is him. He's up here. His goal is to win championships, nothing else. If you're going to play with him, then that has to be your goal as well. And you need to get your level of play up to the level that he considers championship caliber. I mean, everybody talks about, the incident with Steve Kerr, where, the two of them were going at it in practice, and Kerr just got under his skin, and Phil was calling ticky-tack fouls on him, and it blew up, and Jordan decked Kerr, and Phil threw him out of practice. Jordan immediately knew he was wrong. He called Kerr. They hashed it out. They talked, and as Kerr said, they bonded over it, and their relationship became stronger than ever. And I think a couple of the other guys basically agreed with this, that like Jordan had to be who he was. The only way he was going to be able to push this team to championship level was to be that way. And as he said himself, this is my level. This is what I'm working for. This is where I play. You don't want to play that way? Basically, you're not coming with me. And the funny thing is the comic relief side of that is Scott Burrell, who everything Jordan tried to do to get under that dude's skin, and he just couldn't. But I mean, in terms of things that I took away over these 4 episodes, I mean, Rabbi, you touched on a little bit with the 92 Olympics, as someone who was front and center watching that, and it is true. The practices, with that team where they were going, Magic's team against Jordan's team, those practices were a damn sight more competitive than anything that they ran up against in the tournament on their way to the gold. And the Jordan and Pippen, going all in on shutting down and then basically embarrassing Tony Kukoc. And it's funny to listen to Kukoc's side of that whole thing. And he had no idea why they were coming at him as hard as they were, why the 2 of the best defenders in the NBA seemed to be on a personal mission to just totally shut him down. It was only later that he found out that it had nothing to do with him. It was Jordan and Pippen getting back at Krause for lavishing all this praise on Kukoc as the next star of the Bulls, while at the same time still shafting Scottie Pippen. The other thing, you talk about the period that's in between the three-peats where, Jordan leaving, and as Anthony, you put it, and it's something that stood out for me, and I was not aware of this until I watched the series. Jordan had it in his head he wanted to retire. He was so burned out after the last season of that three-peat, and his dad had always wanted him to be a baseball player. So, it's not surprising that, that he would want to try it, walk away from the game, just get away. Everything had gone to hell. And I got to tell you, if you look at it in hindsight, always being 20/20, the media did not endear themselves in any shape, manner, or form trying to attach Jordan's retirement, his father's death, to the gambling. And I firmly believe Commissioner Stern when he says in his interview, no, Michael genuinely retired. There was not, is not, never was in any shape, manner, or form was this a quote-unquote 18-month suspension for gambling, because Jordan didn't break any NBA rules when he was doing it. I mean, I don't think we will ever, you see glimpses of it in the interviews, but I don't think we will ever see just how much the death of his father impacted Jordan. He tries to explain it, but unless you're him and you have a similar type relationship with your own father, you're not going to get it. And, the funny thing is what I did not realize, and I was one of those guys like, why is he starting at AA? So when they explained it, Ransdorf explaining it, because that was the level where they could handle the media that was onslaught that was going to follow him, I got it. Yeah, look, he only hit 202. But you think about it, the man hit 200 after not picking up a bat in competitive baseball for 14 years. And he drove in 51 runs that year. So, and honestly, he was on track. He had, improved himself in winter ball. I think he was up around 250, 270. And if not for the players' strike, he was on track to go to AAA that year. He had every intention. But, the players go on strike, and Scottie Pippen goes, when he's sitting down in between plays and he's lifting up his big, Air Jordans and, saying, come on, come back. I can see how Jordan, he comes back, he starts, practicing, and he kind of gets the itch, and they bring him back. And I got to tell you, I don't think Jordan goes as balls to the wall for the second set of three-peats if they don't lose to Orlando that year. And people forget that was a really good Orlando team. You had Shaq, you had Penny, when those two guys were the dynamic duo in the NBA, the up-and-coming. Nick Anderson, not a guy, who you should, sleep on for that team. That was a really good team. And I think that fueled it for the next set of three-peats. But it's going to be – I really want to see how they play this out. To come back after the loss to Orlando and go 72-10, you think the man had a little incentive to all right, yeah, I know 45 ain't 23, I gave you a little taste of it this year, but now you're going to get it all. I mean, the way they ran roughshod through the league, wow. And it's those 4 episodes put a lot into it, and there's a lot to unpack there and take away from it. I'm really, stoked to see how they wrap it up. I mean, we all know how it ends, but I want to see the road they take to get there. Because the road so far, guys, it's been a hell of a ride.
It has, absolutely. So I have 4 points to close this out. Number 1, when we talked about this last with Dave Shepard, he mentioned a thing on how Michael Jordan was all humble in the beginning of his career. Now, Jay, I understand it is competitive drive, but the destroying people's ego in practice because of how competitive he was, destroying Tony Kukoc because he wanted to just say fuck you to Jerry Krause, getting pissed at the media. And then, again, he would have been great in the social media era. He would have probably been another Kevin Durant. And then to break his silence by having the softball of softball interviews with Ahmad Rashad, who is the biggest Jordan groupie in the history of the Scotty Burrell stuff. And then they try to give him a little redemption angle by having a great game against the New Jersey Nets to clinch that series. Whatever. So 2 other things I want to mention before we okay. The Republicans wear sneakers too comment got a lot of play. And it should, because Jesse Helms only won that election by 4 or 5%. Yeah. And have an influential athlete in North Carolina sway the vote one way or the other. It's not his right to do that. I completely understand that. But
it is. And that's the thing that nobody ever – I don't know why people could not let that go. Just because he's the most famous person, not only in the state of North Carolina, but maybe in the entire country, who says he has to come out and –
He doesn't have to. Absolutely not. But he does have to realize that he probably cost it. He had it in impact.
Ill-advised choice of words, and I think
it was a tremendously ill-advised choice of words. It's not what he said, but it's the message that was sent. And also,
yes,
the LeBradford Smith story is freaking
That's great. Hilarious. I'm glad you're bringing that up.
Oh my God, it's so great just because of the fact that he thought he made up something in his head that LeBradford was mocking him, and then they played him on the end of a back-to-back, and then he just lights them up for 36 in the first half. It just shows that MJ had a little more of a competitive drive than others did just by making shit up. And one more thing, and I'm going to go away from MJ for a second because there were other people in this documentary too. Scottie Pippen sitting out Game 3 is still one of the more selfish acts I think we've ever seen on the basketball.
Well, question.
Yeah, and what's interesting to me is that when they interviewed Scottie about it, the fact that he understands in retrospect that as the star of the team, that's a bad example to set, and the optics are absolutely horrible. He still said he would have probably done it again. That's what I don't get. I mean, that's about as selfish as it gets. To me, that's not, being, your competitive juice saying, I'm the man, I should be the guy doing this. If you're the man, it should be all about you making the players around you good. And the fact that Kukoc hit the damn shot anyway in a play that was drawn up that he has had success for, I mean, come on. The fact that Pippen didn't take the floor, everybody knew it was Kukoc. You not being on the floor made that shot eminently harder than it needed to be. The fact Kukoc made it was amazing in itself.
And you know what's so funny, too? Pippen setting out that one play kind of tarnished what was MVP caliber season for him without Michael Jordan. You think about that 94 Bulls team. They won 55 games. They sent 3 guys to the All-Star game.
Best coaching.
Scottie Pippen was the top 3 as far as MVP voted. But you think about that one play where he kind of took a selfish route and sat out because the ball wasn't coming to him. It was a stigma that kind of stuck with Scottie Pippen really through the back half of his career. Even though he was a big part of the Bulls winning the championships. And then you think about the last game where he had the issue with Jerry Krause as far as his contract and getting the surgery later than expected and having to miss the first couple of months of the season. It was a bad blemish on Scottie Pippen's career from that point forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And to kind of
the other funny thing, Rabbi, and I didn't know if you were going to bring this up, but I kind of have to because it kind of dawned on me. The press conference where Sager brings up the whole stabbing everybody in the back thing, and Krause says, "No, there's no stabbing in the back. Everybody, And then everybody's like, gee, thanks sakes for doing that. But you know what? In a certain way, Krause was kind of right. He didn't stab anybody in the back. He looked him straight in the eye and stabbed him straight in the heart. He wasn't coming at you sideways or from behind. This wasn't any sneak attacks. He was straight up at everybody. He was killing everybody straight to the face.
If you look at the definition of insecure man in the dictionary, Jerry Krause's picture is right next
Napoleon complex.
Guys, we could talk about The Last Dance all night, but unfortunately, we'll save that for social media. And more. All right, so that does it for tonight. Join us next Thursday for another New York sports topic. I come up these with the back of my head. So the topic will be the greatest games to ever involve a New York sports team.
Ooh.
Do your research, gentlemen. For Jay Kaplan and Anthony Strait, my name is Stephen Rabinowitz.
Yes,
Until we find this thing called a studio, we are live each Thursday on Facebook.com/OnTheSportsLines. You can see this show the very next day on YouTube.com/OnTheSportsLines. You have nothing else to do. Why not just get
And, they can follow us on Twitter @OnTheSportsLines if they feel like it.
No.
Yeah, and I'll stay on a fix for jail for moving forward.
Yes.
I'll be on my good behavior.
Yes, be under good behavior and tell the cat in the room he could be fourth panelist if he wants. Anyway.
By the way, did you see that, right? The cat making a little
I saw you a little bit. Anyway, for all the pets and humans out there, good night from On the Sports Lines, and please stay safe.
Stay
Good
safe.
night.
See you next week, guys.